Welcome to another episode of the BoP Passion Podcast, which is basically our chance to speak to the fans, from fans, about the support of football, technical analysis, fan responses, and all sorts of different lovely things to do with the game. Today, we're all Arsenal fans, and the main thing we're going to talk about today is Arsenal and how it's impacted our lives and why we're so passionate about the club. So, without further ado, I'm going to leave it to George first to what he feels about the club.
Yeah, thanks, mate. There's a lot. It's a weird kind of story for me. I think coming from a foreign fan perspective, it's always interesting to see how people think both locally but also internationally about us. Because I know in Canada and even in the States, to be fair, Arsenal, they're a big club, but they aren't, I wouldn't say they're kind of the top two. Typically, people are Liverpool or United fans. And I think a lot of that comes from just popularity of picking the most popular team, because here in North America, soccer or football, which it should be called, but it's not that popular really. And so kind of getting into that sport to begin with was kind of a challenge for me. In terms of my family, I had some grandparents that actually played on some farm teams in Greece. And so for me, football was always going to be in the blood. And so I actually played quite highly here in Canada, and I didn't really start getting into Arsenal until I was about 8 or 9, and I think it was just because I chose a jersey that was red, which was my favorite color. So when I first came in, I didn't really have any influence from a family perspective, because most of my family were kind of Greece or Greek football fans, and so there wasn't really an affinity for English football. But of course, like as I started playing and as I started wearing that jersey, I just happened, thankfully, to pick the Arsenal one as opposed to the Manchester one, which were both reds. And I just started watching the game, and of course, like as I started getting into it, I started playing quite high here, right? So I started researching the game and getting very technical about it. And I think choosing Arsenal at that time period, just because of how old I am, I don't know if people know, I'm 26 now, so it's a case of when I was about 12 or 13, we were kind of in amongst our best period, or had just come out of really our best period with the Invincibles. And so it could have been maybe by lucky chance that I really was able to start studying and loving the game from when we were playing our best football. Call it luck or call it what you can, but really I think the Invincibles for me is definitely probably the team that just stands the most in my mind, really, because though I was young, we were watching these games and I had obviously picked the shirt, and that's something where I started the love for the game. And then when you really got into, I would say, 2010, 2008, I started actually understanding a lot of the tactics. We started getting a lot more involved in terms of both my personal professional career, or attempted one in Canada. And so I started learning a lot of what made teams great. And I would actually kind of argue our best coaching, at least for Arsene Wenger, for me, happened in that period when our stars had left and he was forced to keep kind of rebuilding the team at his own pace without those superstars. And I felt, it was kind of just a great marriage when I was learning about the game, but then being able to see what the value of coaching at a position, coaching in different areas. And that's where I think I really just started getting a love for it, really. I got quite high in terms of, looking into the club's history after at that point, because I started realizing how what we were doing was pretty amazing in my eyes. The idea of competing where we really had no choice to. I've always loved the underdog kind of story, and I felt that Arsenal as a club, at least in that time period, were underdogs. And I always felt as though they were kind of a story I related to, because, here in Canada, I've said, soccer or football, really, as I always kind of address it because it's the respect that it deserves. It didn't get the prestige that it did, kind of amongst my classmates. So, even just playing football kind of outside of school to quite a high level, it never got the same recognition that my basketball peers, or my football peers, the American football peers, were playing. So for me, it was always, I kind of had that underdog affiliation with the club. particularly maybe during that time period where, we weren't at the top level. But, we were still competing with, the top. And I just had a certain affinity for that. And yeah, going back to trying to learn the history, I feel like as I started getting onto, other social media platforms, I think that, you get as a foreign fan a little bit of a barrier. I will say, even with just my accent and whatnot, like when people understand that, I love the game, there is a little bit of a barrier, I feel, trying to prove yourself in a sense. And so in terms of understanding that, I wanted to learn about the club, learn about the history with Herbert Chapman. And that's really where I started analyzing Arsenal as a team, because clearly, look, I hadn't lived it. So I'm not going to sit there and pretend I didn't. But I grew such an affinity for the club. I took it on myself to learn as much as I could, because I knew that I would be met with a little bit of resistance in terms of my knowledge. And of course, I think personally it gets your back up, as a foreign fan. I do think it is a little bit tough because you do find yourself constantly defending. You don't get the experience of being a match-going fan, but I think in terms of, there's a lot of a small minority that's growing right now, but, football here in Canada and North America, it is growing, and there is a little bit of a cult following with it, which I kind of liked. And so that's really why Arsenal became so kind of important to me in a sense, because it really touched both my philosophy in terms of my coaching philosophy, but also my playing philosophy. Like how I grew up here in North America and in Canada, we were very much a possession-based side too, in terms of how my coaches always brought me up. So I really appreciated that side of the game. And I think, again, as I said, with that period where it was 2008, 2010, where I probably had my most success in my own professional career there, that was probably a time where we were playing the most beautiful attacking football kind of in the league at that point. We weren't winning the honors, but we were probably playing the best football in the league. And that just resonated with me, man. I think ultimately when you look at, football and what touches you, it's the pattern of play. And for me, Arsenal was always associated with the team that played the right way. And that was the first thing that really touched me, and I think that's going to carry me towards. And so I've made it my business to kind of just analyze everything about the club, so I'm knowledgeable. And I think that's pretty much my story. Really, it started fundamentally from a playing, but then growing an affinity for the club, and again, it not being so popular that you have to defend Arsenal as a great club to the Manchesters and the Liverpools. For people that don't know, right? Like it became. You have to really know your stuff when you're dealing with that kind of crowd. So I think for me, that's kind of the perspective I took from it. And even as I'm supporting now, it's difficult. I always do sympathize with the international fans. Like, for example, Europa Leagues, that comes at like 1 p.m. That's a work day. It's really tough to really be on top of all the news and everything when you are working in the middle of the day, and you do have to rewatch a lot of these games. On the weekends, these games do start, at 7 a.m. a lot of times, sometimes at 6 a.m. in terms of broadcasting. So, you're getting up at 5, you're getting up at 6 a.m. Like they're not opportune times. And, I always will defend a fan for how they support, whether it's local or international. I do think it's an important thing. That's the only reason I bring it up, because I don't think commitment should matter from where you're from. I do see that a lot on Twitter in terms of Arsenal, but also just domestic kind of.
Just football in general, yeah.
Just football in general, yeah. And your passion for the club should be in terms of how much you've learned to invest in it, not from where you're from. And I do think there's a little bit of a backlash there. So that's essentially my 2 cents of my journey and how I got here.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, you're one of the more knowledgeable people that I've met in terms of not even just talking about football fans, in terms of a football mind in general, and to have someone that quite personally that can actually say something that is substantive and actually has some weight behind it is something that should be commended. And on that note, I'm going to move on to Z to give his thoughts on Arsenal and his story about it.
Well, to be fair, I don't even know where to start because it's kind of a tricky one. This one. Um, so actually, if I wanted to drop a bombshell, so when I was around 7 to 8 years old, I actually used to support Chelsea. Funnily enough, which is really funny. I actually have a shirt that has 26 behind, 26, and it has my name on it, and so everybody actually knows that apart from Arsenal, John Terry actually was my favourite centre back. I always used to love him, but during your school times, you always used to get influenced by the popular kids, right? And the most popular kid in my school at the time used to support Arsenal. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna follow you. I'm gonna support Arsenal, and yeah, so the following summer I came and I had an Arsenal shirt and I had number 7, with Rosiski's number on it, and yeah, just following Arsenal from there, it just started basically. But I would say even in that age, I probably what you'd define as a casual. Just look at Arsenal news on the teletext, and just find out news on the internet and watch games here and there on ITV Sports and stuff. I wasn't ever a an Arsenal fan that was deeply rooted within the club. It was just there for me. But I think what started the proper affiliation with the club was probably my first game for Arsenal, which happened when I was I believe when I was 11 years old, and it was my first game, which was the Arsenal vs Tottenham game, where we won 3-0, and Fabregas scored that solo goal straight from kickoff, and just watching that game, and I just remember everybody screaming towards the scoreboard, saying, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" Whilst I'm just staring at the pitch and I'm looking at Fabregas run through, and I'm just like, "Guys, look, look, look! This guy's running. He's running. He's gonna score. He's gonna score!" And then when Fabregas scored, like the Emirates went in a roar, and believe me, that feeling that I had that day, I don't think anything in the world can ever replicate that feeling. It was one of the most amazing moments I've had in my life, and ever since that day, Arsenal became a part of me. I started to research everything about my club. I started researching like about the history, the previous games. I started watching full 90 minutes of previous seasons, and as years went on, I started becoming a lot more knowledgeable about the club, and I started to attend games on my own from like 13 years old. Funnily enough, with junior gunner membership, and just from there, and my affiliation with the club increased a lot more. And now, what I'm a good age 24, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, I'm really, really, really like happy with the way my involvement in football, has increased, because when I'm the most easiest way to put it is that no one in my family is just watches football like the way I do. I certainly got my little brother into football. If I didn't, I'm sure for a fact he would have never watched football. It's just the way it is. So yeah, I mean that's how my involvement with Arsenal, happened. And as time went on, I started attending Champions League games, Premier League games, and I've seen some very, very bad defeats really. And they used to be they used to make or break my mood. It was just a part of Arsenal, that I had to go through. I say probably since I started supporting Arsenal, I think that's when we had our worst period, right? We stopped winning trophies. I remember there was a game against Chelsea where the fans were singing, "For 5 years you won FO," and all that stuff, and it was just a really, really tough moment to go through. But the thing is, I still, as a fan, haven't experienced that winning period, so I'm still waiting for that. But the fact is, I agree with the George. It's the feeling of the underdogs. It's the feeling of proving everyone wrong, and it's kind of reflects how I am as a person in reality as well. I want to prove everyone wrong, and I feel like Arsenal, mirrors that. So that's probably why my affiliation with Arsenal is quite strong, and yeah, the story started from there really.
So I think that's a lot of people. I mean, we have people saying about their first game and going to games and falling in love with the club and actually having a connection with the club. Um, And we're going to come back to Z, but for now, I'm going to go to CK to see where his thoughts are.
Yeah, for me, I'm a bit younger than these guys, so that
Yeah.
I haven't really been supporting Arsenal as extensively because obviously I'm younger in it. But for me, the first game I went to was Villarreal 2006, the 1-0 at Highbury. I vividly remember that day. Like, I remember it being a good day because obviously we went to the final, innit? But like, I never really got into football till maybe 2010. Like the big like first memory that hit me of Arsenal was 4-1 Barcelona in 2010, and then after that I really got into Arsenal surprisingly, even though that was probably one of the worst ties in our Champions League history. But like after that, I just fell in love with Arsenal. I don't know. I think it was just the football and how everybody talked about Arsenal, because even in my family, there's different portions of fans. Like my brother's a Chelsea fan, my dad's a Liverpool fan. Like only my oldest brother was an Arsenal fan, and he really got me into supporting Arsenal. So like after that match, and then I keep watching Arsenal, and then I just fell in love with certain players like that. In that season, I fell in love with Fabregas, and then he left. And then I fell in love with Van Persie, and he left. Then I fell in love with Ozil, and
he's just left.
yeah. So it's like in the period I've really supported Arsenal. We haven't won a league or anything significant, but I've always been appreciative of watching some football that we've produced over the years, because that's really what attracts many people to Arsenal. Is Arsenal, they play football in the best way. Arsenal, or you'll never watch Arsenal and it be a boring match and stuff like that. So that's what really attracted me to Arsenal. And I've only seriously not been a casual per se for maybe the past 5 years, 6 years, like maybe since the second FA Cup Wenger one, or the second one of this decade, in 2015 is when I really started watching Arsenal, watching every game and going to games and stuff like that. But COVID really stopped me going to games because I was really getting into going back into, because in the end of Wenger's period, it was really toxic, which put me off going to Arsenal games and watching Arsenal for a little bit, because it was a weird situation in the fan base. But for me, I've really Arsenal's been a big part of my life, obviously, but I don't think I'd ever change. And then I never thought in the past that I would stay with Arsenal after that 4-1, but it is what it is, isn't it? And I hope for the future that my love for this club can be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, so before we do give it to the elder statesman of the group, we'll give it to I'll go and give a bit of my story here, because this is going to be, I mean, I'm quite old myself, so I might as well go into what my history with this club is. So I only started watching football around the age, I think it was 8, and my dad was a Manchester United fan, and this was when United were United. They were the greatest team in the world. They in '99, when I was 9 years old, they won the treble, and I went to my dad, "Can we go see them?" And he was like, "What do you mean go see them?" I said, "Well, we're meant to be supporting this club. Can we go see them play?" And he was like, "No, if they come to London, maybe, but well, I'm not driving you to Manchester to go see Manchester United." And I was like, "Well, why am I supporting them then? I can't even go and see the club. Why am I supporting them?" And from that day on, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna find my own club. Screw this. I don't care. And there was only, I mean, I went through a period where I went through a couple of teams and was looking at teams, and I looked at Liverpool, I looked at Everton for a while, Tottenham, Chelsea, all these teams. I looked at them, and then I saw I think it was 2000, and it was the Henry. I think it was Fabien Barthez messed up, and Henry just dominated that game, took it past Barthez and put it past him, and that was it for me. I fell in love with the club. I that was it. It was done for me, and ever since then, it's only ever been one club for me. It was Arsenal first, Arsenal always. I didn't really get to go to games until my first game. I lived my life in Wembley, so my first game was actually the 05 FA Cup final against Manchester United. I have a very strong affinity with Manchester United through the years, but if in terms of my first game was Manchester United in the 05 FA Cup final, the penalties, where Vieira won it, and it was a case of that game is so vividly imprinted on my memory, and it felt like I still have the shirt somewhere. I think it's hung up in my room, and that game for me and Arsenal for me was passion, it was enjoyment, it was a love for free flowing movement. I've always looked at football as movement. It's not about what happens just on the ball, it's what happens off the ball as well. And as time has gone on, I've learned more and more about the game. I went back and learned about Herbert Chapman. I went back and learned about the 81. I learned about the FA Cup. I have such a strong affinity to the FA Cup. That is, like, when people like not diss in quotation marks the FA Cup, it hurts me, because it's such it's the oldest cup competition in the world. I went to the Emirates showing of the Hull FA Cup. We all stormed onto the pitch. That was one hell of a day. There was I can go through countless memories. The only thing that I regret about Arsenal is not being able to go to Highbury. I should have gone to Highbury. I've been to the Emirates plenty of times, but Highbury for me was, I walked past there and it's just like, I should have gone. But if I'm talking about what Arsenal means to me, Arsenal to me is passion, is enjoyment, it's love of not only the game but love of each other. There's the Victoria Concordia Cresca. It's victory through harmony. It's a harmonious. It's a group of people that are working together in harmony to create something beautiful, and that's what Arsenal means to me. That was what it meant to me under Arsene Wenger specifically. It's what I hope Mikel Arteta will bring to the club again, because the squad is fractured, and we can go into all of that. But what Arsene Wenger and Arsenal meant to me, it was that it didn't matter how bad the team were doing or how great the team were doing. It was together. They did it together. It was always the team. It was always freedom of movement. It was freedom to express yourself on the pitch, because you knew that you could trust the next man next to you. You knew you could trust the person behind you. You knew that you were a unit together. And even though the football and the style of football changed throughout the years, I mean, from the Tony Adams, Martin Keown days to the Fabregas era to the Özil era, and then now the current era, the football has changed, the style of football has changed, and the way the football has changed. But the core values of the club are that we are one, we are together, and even though we've strayed from that path in recent years, you can see an effort to bring that back, and that's why I am invested in the club now. I'm more invested than I have been in a while, because I see that people want to work for each other again. It's not just individuals working for each other, for themselves, sorry. So in terms of like football styles, I mean, I when I went to uni and I was abroad, I looked at different types of football. If you've listened to the podcast, you know my affinity to the Johan Cruyff 4-4-3. But I've also looked through the Herbert Chapman WM formation with the halfbacks. I've looked through the Cruyff, the Peps, the Wenger 4-4-2, the Ferguson 4-4-2 with wide wingers, and my football philosophy has come from great men like Arsene Wenger who have molded me to understand what an Arsenal football game should achieve and how Arsenal work as a club. And I really hope that's what Mikel Arteta brings back to the club. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Nom if he fancies having a bit of a chat on Arsenal.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I mean, look, I was just listening to you guys, and you know what makes me sort of proud still to be an Arsenal supporter is when I'm around younger supporters who've got such passion about their club, because I can relate to that. It doesn't matter what era I'm from. I know I'm probably suffering from senile dementia, so I'm trying my best to sort of recollect like key moments. But a lot of your stories are sort of similar to mine, really, but in a different era. Just like Z, I didn't really support another club. I was football mad as a kid. No one in my family, I'm the eldest of 7 kids, right? So nobody in my family really followed football. Dad was too busy at work. Mum was definitely not following football. And but I started playing at primary school, and I started playing with my mates. And my closest mate, he was an Arsenal supporter, and I didn't really have a club, because to me at the time, I just loved playing football. So the pure playing the football, enjoying the game, as just this innocence that I had of enjoying this game, thinking, wow, this game's, it's, even then at that age, I had this amazing love for the game. And I remember him telling me that, I asked him who he supports, because he had the Arsenal t-shirt on. I think this must have been 1988, 89. I know, yeah. And so this was under the George Graham era, and I didn't really have a club. So I thought, okay, this mate of mine called Matthew, I thought, he supports them, so I'll give it a go. I don't know about watching football. I know I love playing football, and I don't think I watched a game until 1991 when we played Leeds, and that was the first televised game. And I can tell you guys, it was a real anticlimax, because it was one of the worst games I think I've ever seen. But I could relate something to Arsenal. As that time went on, even though I said, right, I'm going to support Arsenal, I didn't really look into the club that much. I was ignorant of the success that we're having. I wasn't following it enough as a kid to understand the success. And to be honest, at the time, it wouldn't really matter to me, like it probably does to a lot of young fans now. There wasn't people really going around bragging and rubbing people's faces in it at that age in terms of who you supported and who you didn't. We were too busy playing football. But it's when I started following them, when I started secondary school, it's when I really got into it, just in year 11. And that's when I went through a period of time where I was trying to keep myself out of trouble. So I spent a lot of time in the library and trying to keep myself out of trouble in secondary school. And what I did was I spent a lot of time reading the back of the papers, like I used to do in my dad's place of work. And I would also get a chance to follow my club and find out more about them. There was books there, and I started reading at books, and I was interested in tactics. Come across this one book, and I started reading about that. And all of that piqued my interest in the club even more. So I started following football a lot more, not just playing it, which I spent hours and hours playing every day. And I hooked all my brothers into playing the game, and I hooked most of them into being Arsenal supporters, apart from one who I think one of my cousins got hold of, and he became a Liverpool supporter. And we started a few traditions in our family. Every Saturday, you couldn't watch televised football, because obviously it went when Sky came along. But I found Radio 5 when it first got launched, and we used to listen to the games, and Alan Green doing his commentary. I don't know if any of you guys remember this, or if any of you guys ever listened to football on the radio before, back in the day when Sky wasn't around everyone's house. And we'd be following the football on radio, right? And it was a different era. I mean, almost when I'm thinking back on it now, it just seems crazy that you would listen to radio and listen to the whole game. But honestly, you'd have to visualize the whole game. Yeah. I have to admit, Alan Green was one of the most controversial commentators. He used to have an orgasm every time Man United used to play, and he used to somehow hate Arsenal for some reason. He would always make out Arsenal's games were dour and not exciting. Then you go and watch the highlights of Match of the Day, you think, what? The game was amazing. What was this guy going on about? Right? So I went through a few eras, but Bruce Rioch wasn't there. I quite like Bruce Rioch. I didn't think he was a bad guy. I don't think a year was enough for him to be able to get his ideas across. No. But obviously he fell out with the club, and George's teams were like what I would call, before I go into Bruce Rioch, George's teams were real underdog teams. Like he loved being the underdog. He had a bit of Alex Ferguson about him in terms of he wanted everyone to hate the club so that the players would close ranks. And they could play football, but at times they wouldn't give a monkeys as long as they got the result. So there was a bit of like that Jose Mourinho sort of, the result is more important than the style of football.
Yeah.
And I remember us beating Sheffield Wednesday in the 2 cup finals, and I remember everyone telling me at school and that Sheffield Wednesday are the better team, they should win at least one of them. You guys wouldn't be able to beat them in both games, and we did. And then I'd go in and I'd face all these people saying, "Oh, Sheffield Wednesday played better football." I'm thinking to myself, I couldn't care monkeys, at the time. At the time, winning was important. And I guess when you're young, that's really important. It's only, I think, when Arsene Wenger came along that the man changed and at the same time affirmed a lot of things that I believed in football, which seems crazy, right? You're this kid growing up, you're an Asian kid, you're football mad, your siblings are football mad. You've developed your own philosophy of how you play because, we were small kids. We couldn't run around and match some of our, British counterparts. They were bigger, taller, stronger. And so we played this little short passing game. And there's this guy who comes along and says that's the style he wants to play. He wants to get these Tony Adams and Steve Bold to pass the ball around. And I was sat there thinking, this is insane. How is this man going to do this, right? And I watched him work his magic, and then I watched him work his magic with younger players, and then I watched him bring success. And I watched him literally stick 2 fingers up with the establishment at the time and show that things can be done differently. And the most amazing thing about it is he did it with principles. And I don't want it to be a segment where I'm just reminiscing on Arsene Wenger, but for me, this guy really brought the club fully back to all the values, like the Herbert Chapman values. Because when I studied the history, I realized that he was much closer to Herbert than most people give him credit for. He worried about principles more than just winning. I know that really caught up with him at the end, but I think he taught us youngsters at the time lots of really valuable lessons that I even carry out in life today. And a lot of my coaching philosophy as a coach, I've had the privilege of coaching some Arsenal under-14s as a school teacher, and it was amazing seeing that they've been indoctrinating that philosophy. So this is way before HLN became a formalized entity. And so, I remember my first game. I managed, because I didn't grow up in London. I taught in London for 20 years, and that allowed me to come up and see more games. But I remember coming up seeing a game in 1999 against Blackburn at Highbury. So I managed to get into Highbury and watch a game before, fans didn't get a chance to. I watched a number of games at Emirates. When I came up to London, living in London, I had no excuses. Part of the reason at the one point, I was so passionate about the club. When they turned Highbury into flats, I was desperate to try to buy a flat. I would love to have had a chance, but they were so expensive, I couldn't do it at the time.
I'm gonna do it. I don't care. I'm gonna do it.
I was so envious of those people who could. I just didn't have enough money on me to be able to go and do that. Because the dream was the fact that you could sleep, in the sort of at the stadium that you grew up watching and idolizing those players. I mean, I can't even explain that. I mean, those people who've got a flat there are sitting and sleeping in, every person's dream who's experienced Highbury or seen their sort of favorite players play in that stadium. So, for my association with the club, and it touches with what Karen was saying, it's not just about the club and football, but all those values that go with it. For me, a lot of the times when I used to meet real fans, I'm not talking about football Twitter here yet, face-to-face fans, we had this instant, you could have a very short conversation, you'd have an instant connection with the other Arsenal fan. Do you know what I mean? Because you all understood what those values meant and how important those values were, right?
Yeah.
And that this club always stood for more than just that. It was massive in the community. It had a massive outreach in terms of how it wanted it to influence the younger generation. It's kind of sad that we sort of have that a little bit diluted now when I look at some of the social platforms and stuff. But I'm not the kind of person to give up on my club and the values that I grew up watching and sort of holding, dear to me. I still feel like if you're an Arsenal supporter, you need sometimes to understand why you're supporting this club. It's not just mere results and,
It's a
looking at
collective.
and current, what it is for me, it's like, I really don't care what the other clubs do. I understand my club. I understand what it stands for. And success can be temporary, class is permanent. So, and I say that with all sincerity because there isn't any other rival fan who can't say that Arsenal means something as a football club. It's not just a club. You know, there's a
No.
meaning and there's a history to that club. So for me, I really feel that and I really believe that. And I hope, you know, my hope is that the next generation don't forget that and they remember that and they can hold on to that, especially when they're going through difficult times.
For sure. I mean, just to piggyback off that, it's like, for me, it's about realizing that you're more than one person. I think that's the main thing about the club. It's about realizing that there are people that you would never ever meet in any form of life, and that you have this thing in common. You have this shirt, you have this badge, you have these players in common. And I often get really annoyed on Twitter, where I know everyone does, but for me, what annoys me is when you don't support the players on the pitch, because those are our players. We when you put on this shirt, I know it's a Puma one, but when you put on this shirt and you wear that badge, you are in, and you're in that stadium or you're watching at home, and you see I don't know, a Pascal Sigon or Sebastian Squillaci. It doesn't matter about the quality, but when they're wearing that badge, they are our players, and you have to respect that. The club have bought that man, and that man deserves respect for being able to play at a level that is deemed enough for one of the most historical clubs in the world, never mind the country. So like, that is the only thing that annoys me about the club, because there is history, heritage, and respect that has been woven into our club since the 1880s or 1890s. Even when we were at Woolwich, even through the Herbert Chapman era, through the 70s and 80s, through David Rocastle, through Thierry Henry, through Arsene Wenger, through everyone, there has been always a sense that we are bigger than one person. You are the club. And when you step on that field, you are representing that cannon on your chest. And as Tony Adams used to say, if you play for the cannon on the front, they will remember the name on the back. And that needs to be brought back to our club, because sometimes the fans have forgotten what this club means. And it's more than just trying to be right about whatever issue you want to be right. It's about a community of people that have come together in solidarity to actually form something that is beautiful, and that is Arsenal Football Club.
You know what it is, Curran? You're searching for a legacy. We have had so many teams at this point who winning is not a legacy. I think people confuse prestige and heritage. They're two very different words, often used as synonyms, but are often miscorrectly used. When you talk about prestige, that can be a moment. Heritage implies a history of prestige. You know, it's a history of long-term success. It's a history of impacting the game at a cellular level, in a sense. And what I mean by that is, you know, Arsenal have taken a local club, a local London club, and have gone global. How many teams have done that? Very, very, very few. And you're looking at the top three in England, really, with England, in terms of, you know, Liverpool, Manchester United, and Arsenal. Like those are your teams that have taken local priorities to global phenom success. And they haven't just done it over a period of 2 decades. They've done it over a period of, I'd say, over 5 decades in terms of impacting the English game. When you fundamentally change how this game is viewed, which, by the way, I think the one thing that all football fans, not social media on Twitter, but all football fans, when they see each other in real life, they love the fact that we appreciate the same beautiful game. I love the fact that I watch a game, I'm set in my tactical ways, and then I meet, you know, you lads here who see the exact same product, the exact same thing, and could have a totally different perspective on what you've seen. And what I think is beautiful about that is I maintain there is not a sport in this world right now that has captured global appeal to the degree that football has, and there's a reason for it. While there might be certain fan bases in terms of, you know, definitely plenty of European support from basketball, football, there's a reason that, you know, the real football, is the global game. There's a reason for it. There's a reason it touches Africa, Australia, every corner of the earth. And for me, when you look at a legacy and you look at fan perception, I agree with you, Karan. I really get tired, and I talk about this on Twitter quite a lot, about the self-deprecation of our fan base. And I believe a lot of it comes from 2 decades of not really achieving what maybe some might perceive as, prestige, really.
A decade and a half.
You've got a generation of fans that, have grown up not in success, so they don't understand having got there. They don't understand the journey of having climbed that mountain quite yet. And you then have a clash between some older heads, I believe, who have recognized that journey, because we've summited. It's not like we haven't summited the peak of football. We have. And I think, but not growing up supporting in those vital years certainly is a fear. I don't know if Nam or some of the older guys have this, but I've always had this fear that, I think Chris is at the tail end in his age bracket of actually having seen some kind of success at least.
Yeah.
But for those that really grew up in the club, let's say from 2013, 2012, some really recent fans, right, who have grown up in their formative years, like I consider myself blessed, really, to grow up in a formative years of the Invincibles and just after the post-Invincibles, where, Arsenal still carried a global appeal of being one of the best played. They were everybody's second team. They were everybody's Dortmund, Like, realistically, Arsenal played the best football in the world. That's what they were known for, even if they didn't win. And
even through the early 2010s, it was still, yeah.
And I'm worried, and I carry this fear, and I don't know how others feel, that without, success, you do run, the risk of being a history book. You do. And
yeah, of course.
And so that's why it's important for us fans, in my opinion, to stick together, just to kind of bring it back and agree with you, Curran, because I believe that the mentality of winning is a culture change that didn't just need to happen on the pitch with the players within the infrastructure of the club, but needs to happen with the fan base in general. The fractures that we've had in the fan base, these aren't what winners do, by the way. I see Manchester United, and I don't see the same self-deprecation that I see with Arsenal.
No, there really is, especially with the last couple of years, George. It's been, it's not the same extent, but it is there. And
there is there, but yeah. I see that there's a greater divide, and it started with Arsene Wenger. I feel like we Arsenal fans, and this is just maybe a foreign perspective, but it seems like on Twitter that Arsenal is known for a fractious in and out. You choose something, and there's these debates within clubs that aren't just fan specific, but they go to the core about people. And from afar, I'll just let you know, the idea of the Arsene Wenger in and out debate, it went deeper than a lot of, just basic, I don't like the manager, I don't like the direction, I don't like the direction of our club.
Yeah,
it became a moral argument that I didn't see with other fan bases when they went through difficult periods, because other fan bases went through similar difficult periods. Like I never saw the same degree of divide within fan bases. Say in a United with Alex Ferguson, like I had mates that, would slam me and say that Moyes was the greatest manager. I didn't see that staunch defense towards the latter years.
The perfect example actually is a early to mid 2010s Liverpool, actually, because they had a period like we're going through right now where they were hovering around Europe, just dropping down, and they united as a fan base. They were staunch about it.
Can I just say something? You're right. Yeah. I was just literally going to mention Liverpool, because for me, and I hope this is what you were saying, that Liverpool didn't fracture as a fan base. They clearly knew what the problem was. The problem was the ownership.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly what I was going to say.
I think. Look, I'm an Arsene Wenger man, right? I'm not going to ever deny that. There's lots of us out there, but we're the silent majority. Now I understand. I can say that statement. I can also say at the same time, at the end, football even left my greatest hero behind, and it was time for him to do what's best for his health. Forget about everything else, just for himself. To get out of that scene because he was getting too toxic. For a man of his age and his, principles, it's very difficult, I guess, for him to walk away because he loves the club. There is no doubt about that. It doesn't matter who the hell you think you are as a fan. You can be a Wenger out guy, you can hate the guy, but you can't say he doesn't love the club. You might say he might have loved it delusionally towards the end. That's fine. But I never saw the Liverpool fan base under stress fracture. And I know I'm going to sound controversial here, but I feel like that's because they've got good old heads in that Liverpool Sporting Football Club. You know, the older fans kept the younger fans in check. I feel like our older fans let the younger fans down. They set a really bad example. They set a really bad example because they were busy going around, you know, slagging off our manager without any context, showing how unknowledgeable they were about our club because they literally let the board and everybody else off and decided to focus on the one thing that the club wanted to do, which was to let the manager take the flak for everything. The truth is, all of this has come out in his autobiography, right? All of this has come out in his autobiography. You know what? I'm not seeing any of those hardcore fans who are now what I call celebrity fans come back and say, you know what? I owe that man an apology. Maybe it wasn't all on him. But that's fine, because you know what? They said their piece at the time, and why should they go back? Because they're hoping people forget. Some of us don't forget.
No.
And I'm not trying to be fractious myself when I'm saying that. I think, you know, when you grow up as a human being, when you're wrong, it's okay to put your hand up and say, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Shows the mark of a person. But what gets me now is they've set a precedent. The precedent is this, that, you know, your views are more important than the values of the club that you support. Your views, if other people disagree with, then they're invalid. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You're meant to be a part of the family.
It's literally goes against the ethos of the club, and I'm going to bring Z in because I think he wanted something to get out as well.
I'm just saying, I think it's sad that, you know, during the period that I probably started watching Arsenal, it's when, you know, everything started going the wrong way. You know, like CK said, you know, Fabregas was actually my favorite player. He left 2 seasons after. Then Van Persie, you know, was like the second guy. He left a season after, and then you look at the club and you're like, where is this club heading? Like, what is the direction? And then during that season where I believe it's when we played against West Ham and we lost 1-0. Is when the evolution of Arsenal Fan TV came in, right? And it just exploded, and I think that's changed the whole fan base forever. I don't think we will ever have a unity within the fan base because there's always 2 spectrums of, you know, of opinions, and it's the opinion which, you know, gets the most validity, the most likes, the comments, you know, the most retweets, whichever platform it's on, and it's kind of sad because that's the way we're viewing the world right now. And to be fair, there was a moment. There was actually a very, very old Twitter account on that's still on Twitter right now. I won't name him, but I remember there was a point where after a defeat, he posted a video and he called Arsene Wenger by the C word at least 15 times in the space of 30 seconds. And he's probably one of the most senior men like on Twitter right now. When I used to see that stuff at that age, I knew the fan base was fractured from there, really. So it's sad. It's sad to see.
Yeah, I mean, go on, CK.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think social media definitely has had a big impact on the extent to which Arsenal's fan base is fractured. Because you did mention the Liverpool situation with in like the 2010s where they were very poor, but with our period,
the AFTV law and all these type of things,
when social media was the main thing, whereas in the Liverpool period, social media was never this big, and
not this big, nowhere near. Yeah,
I think the fact that people can because a lot of the things you see are made by accounts that are just anonymous, and so that anonymous situation that people put themselves in online has given people like some sort of confidence to say whatever they want, and that has come with these reckless opinions and reckless statements getting a lot of likes and a lot of retweets and making people happy, which has caused a chain reaction where people just are outraged at any simple thing. And we've seen it very recently with anything you see, any player you see linked to Arsenal, any player you see leaving, there's just a massive outrage. And I think a lot of the time it's not really real, but on social media just to get the likes and to feel some sort of like
Yep, for sure.
pride
Well,
or something.
there's a certain
think
amount of
I-
validation from it, right? Like the outrage culture, you remove responsibility in anonymity. That's what you're doing, and I do think, and one criticism I believe is that we need to get better at not accepting this type of behavior, because this type of behavior doesn't occur on any team, regardless. I think, having coached a bit, and I'm sure Nam can attest, like when you are a coach, you look at the collective whole, right? That is your job as a coach. It's not to improve one player, two players. You have to improve the team. And so my mindset is, regardless of your fan opinion, I never critique how a fan supports, because it's your right. It's your team. You can support how you want. But
Yeah.
the way you do it and your conduct needs to be to a respectful degree. There needs to be respectful discourse between your own fans, because you guys are on the same side. At the end of the day, you both want what's best for your club and our club. And I always make that distinction whenever I talk to people that maybe, disagree, but do so in a kind of a disrespectful way or in a fractious way. I make sure to say, look, guys, this is our club. It's not just your club, or it's not just my club. It's our club. And if we're going to get to a place where we're going to be productive, we got to remove the name calling and just stick to the debate in terms of whether or not you disagree. And I do think, to be fair, because I am an optimist, when you do sit down and talk to people, my final kind of points on the fractious nature of the fan base is that it can be repaired, but fundamentally we just live in a short-termism of kind of social media, where I unfortunately do believe that we won't achieve that unity in the fan base until we achieve a certain amount of success, really, and we do
for sure.
return to the top. I think there is a certain section that doesn't apply, but ultimately, I just hope that we as fans can keep respectful discourse. That's all I ask, both on my social media channels, and I'm sure like all the boys here do the exact same thing, where regardless,
it's respectful or blocked. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's not that deep. If you get a line, it's a block.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a debate too. And I do make that distinction. That is wrong. How you conduct yourselves, we're all adults or striving to be young adults, and how you comport yourself in public and in social media should be the same. There should be a consistency to your character.
If you wouldn't say something like what you're typing in real life to me, then do not type it to me. It's that simple. I think I'm gonna ask for some final thoughts. I think Norm, you can go first, mate.
Yeah, I mean, listen, guys. You guys have known me for a while now. I was silent on football Twitter for a long, long time. I didn't feel like I needed to speak. I felt like I was following, I was supporting. The opinions didn't really matter to me at the time. And it got tempting to say something when it was the Wenger in, Wenger out. But I was hoping it was just going to be a phase and it would die out and it wouldn't really affect it. But there's naive thinking now, because I see the after effects now on that platform. I tell you, I mean, you guys will know, I've spoken to Spaces several times and I've dealt with some really angry fans, some emotional fans. And I've spoke to them and they've turned out to be not bad people, Sometimes we've had really angry people come on. And for me, the most important thing is I think a lot of time people come onto platforms like that to be heard, as opposed to get attention.
In that situation, there are a couple of people that we know personally that we've met on a space, and then now we're just mates with them. It's very easy to turn people around in that case. And if you have people that are willing to listen and willing to learn, then it's not really a problem. It's just that when you have people that are they're trying to put their own agenda above the love of the club and wanting the best for the club, then we have a problem.
Karen, I mean, when we, a lot of the times, look, I'd like to think 90% of our fan base are good, reasonable people, that they would listen respectfully. Sometimes they might not.
95%, 95, even 98%.
I'm going to say 90%, because some people might, listeners out there might think, no, there's a big portion of people who don't listen to reason. It could be, it doesn't matter what side of the argument you're coming from. Unfortunately, it's a view held on the different spectrums that we have within our fan base. Yeah. Some people think that it's larger, Karen, because their voice is the ones that are amplified the most. And sometimes what football Twitter has is that you have, within our fan base, you have this anxiety amplification. And there are some, what I would call, big accounts which amplify that sound,
But
where it becomes almost unbearable for
do
these
we
poor
not
supporters.
do we not think of Twitter as probably? It's a weird question, but surely there's more fans that support Arsenal that aren't on Twitter or any or on
Yeah,
social
for sure,
media.
and that's
Yeah, of
why.
course. Yeah, Z. I do.
Yeah, that's why I'm a bit
There are
more optimistic than you are, Nom. That like I honestly think it's at least 95% of the fan base that aren't like this. I know there are bad eggs on Twitter or bad eggs and on social media in
Right.
general, Instagram or whatever. But in terms of real Arsenal fans, people that go to the games, people that watch the games all across the world, I think that they understand what the club means and they understand the values of the club, and that's what attracts them to the club.
Yeah, and I think that what Nom was saying with the 90% is that the biggest names in most fan bases are negative, which amplify because a lot of people
we're gonna be doing a podcast on the implications of social media on the fan base and in discourse in general. So I don't want to get too far into it, but that's sort of the kind of thoughts. And I'm gonna ask Z and George if they have anything they want to say before I give my final thoughts, and we can head off.
I mean, there's not really much to say. I mean, I spoke about how I got into Arsenal. It's just now is what's happening within our fan base, how fractious it is. It's really sad to see because sometimes you look for people to get positive reinforcement, right? And the more you go, the more you try and search for those. What happens is it feels like you're actually digging yourself in a hole where things are looking much worse than it is. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm just hoping very quickly all the restrictions ease. I can just get myself to Arsenal games and then come home and just switch off Twitter,
Yeah.
and live my life really, because I think that's what's going to be going to make me a lot happier. I think this whole lockdown stuff that happened it just has ruined my
Yeah.
motivation for everything towards Arsenal. It's actually kind of sad, but we move, right?
Yeah, we move.
Yeah.
Go on, George.
I think just really to wrap up for me, because I want to end on a positive note, because at the end of the day, we on this podcast like to look at the positive indicators I see for us moving forward. And I really do believe that we're in the right direction. We're steered in the right path to achieve that kind of prestige that we all really fundamentally yearn for, regardless if you're negative or positive. We all want Arsenal Football Club to succeed, not yourself. And I really believe that we're in a way to do so. The only thing I really would say is with Arsenal, just remember that when you do get into an argument or you do feel that somebody is not expressing a viewpoint that you agree with, just understand that the common thread that ties you together is your love for this club. Respect its values, its ethos, and you typically will get to a much better understanding and even product at the end of the day, where you can understand each other's views when you do accept that respectful discourse is the only way that you're going to end in a positive light. So I'm hopeful. I'm the optimist here, and I think there's others here that are more optimistic than me. But as an optimist, I always look to see the best in people, and I am excited for the future. So I did want to just end that. It's amazing being a foreign fan to develop such a passion and love for a club that in some people's eyes may look distant, but to me is so dear to my heart. And it's just awesome to meet guys like you who are strangers in my mind. It baffles me that I consider family right now. So it's just unbelievable. And that's the power of football. That's literally the power of the beautiful game.
I'll let the optimist give his final thoughts. So if you want to go seek it.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the most optimistic people in the fan base right now, to be honest. But with Arsenal, it's just like I do think the future is bright, the near future is bright, and even in the past, like the recent past, hasn't been so good, but it's done a good thing for us. It's brought us together, and we probably wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for Arsenal.
No.
So it's done something good for us. But yeah, we all love Arsenal, and we all see Arsenal in a different light. But I don't think that different perspectives should cause any hatred or arguments at all.
No.
So yeah, like for me, Arsenal are gonna do well next season.
Yeah. We both hope so, and I do agree with you. I do think we're going to do very well next season. Just to finish off, what George was saying about having respectful arguments. If you look at, if you've watched a couple of our podcasts or seen us, both of us, me and George have completely different football philosophies. We don't agree on a lot of things, but I still consider George a friend and a colleague, and I respect his opinion, and I respect that he has his philosophy and he sticks to his guns. And what me and George have is a respectful dialogue. And if you have that same, as George was saying, that common ethos, that love for the club, then you are more than happy. It doesn't matter if you disagree. It doesn't matter if you're Arteta in, Arteta out, Wenger in and Wenger out in the past. Hell, Bruce Rioch in, Bruce Rioch out in back in the day. It doesn't matter. What matters is you understand that the three words that our club was built on: Victoria, Concordia, Crescit, victory through harmony. What you have to understand is this club is more than just a bunch of people that are fitting a stadium. It's a movement. It's a family. It's something that we as people, as human beings, can come together and actually celebrate and find some sort of respite in this world that we live in. And to finally to end on a positive note, Arsenal to me is the best thing that you can have in terms of a passion for me. I don't see anything else. I have tons of different passions, but for Arsenal, I will stop my day for Arsenal. I will like if it comes to it, like the Özil transfer, I was up the entire the whole of that transfer window, looking at my iPad, looking at Jim White, looking for that Özil transfer, waiting for that news, and then seeing that guy, I can't remember his name, outside the Emirates with people mugging him at the back. Like, Arsenal is it's a passion, it's a way of life, it's something that we all agree with, and I just want to wrap it up on that. So thank you, everyone. This will be going on Spotify on Monday. It will go on YouTube on Wednesday, and please like, comment. Subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube. Please follow if you're on Spotify, and follow us on Ball Over Passion. My name is Karan, and thank you all for listening. And good night, everyone.